Hello everybody, Ace here, giving it to you straight with day 87 of the Video Log Challenge, and today I wanted to talk to you all about spiritual ego and how we need to stop letting that dim our light. Now, it's a hard time to be an awakened, enlightened being on this planet, I understand. I've been a little more serious this last couple of videos, trying to get us to realize that it's time for us to stand out, to speak up, to understand that everything we do for ourselves is for the collective. Every time we help someone, it's for the collective, and it's also for us. It's a paradox. Everything is selfishly selfless. So every time you transmute, not transfer, every time you transmute your own darkness, then you do that for the collective, and that's more stuff the collective doesn't have to transmute themselves. But what is spiritual ego? Now, in our community, a lot of us have overcome the human ego. A lot of us have overcome that trauma, not completely, but enough so that we're living in light, we're living with love, we're living with kindness, generosity, and all those things. But what happens when we don't address the rest of the trauma because we think we're good enough, we think we're far enough, we think we don't need to do anything more? What happens is we're going to find ourselves in spiritual situations that's going to actually trigger us. And then we're going to find ourselves defending our spiritual stances, trying to convince other people of our points of view, and compromise ourselves because it's uncomfortable to be challenged. Now, I have had a huge ego in my life because of the trauma I faced. I was not very good at sticking up for myself, so some element in me that's not me, which to me the body is the ego, the human element is your ego, which is divine masculine. An unhealed divine masculine is ego, in my opinion. And that's why as we move forth and we heal the human trauma and then we go into the spiritual stuff, which means not only healing the residual trauma from our lives, but all of the other past lives that we've lived, all the times we felt separated from God, all the times we didn't feel like ourselves, all the times we compromised ourselves, and all the other times that we've been compromised. There's where all our trust issues come from. That's where our love issues come from. That's where our relationships issue come from. And because a lot of us don't believe in reincarnation or are just starting to kind of come to terms with that, we really believe that there really isn't that much for us to heal. But in reality, we have to heal it all. And if you're an awakened, enlightened being that's into this kind of content, you're most likely an ascended master incarnate. And therefore, your spiritual ego is going to be a little thicker than most because you've been here longer, you've done more than most, and you know more than most, yet we don't believe it for ourselves, and so then we project our shit onto everybody when we need to defend our stance instead of just truly believing our own truth and being okay with somebody challenging it. And I'm the first one to admit that I have a hard time still being told differently than what I think or feel. I take a lot of pride, ego, in my concepts and my theories because I spent my whole life working towards them. But what I've also realized is because I don't allow other people to express themselves to me freely sometimes, that I don't get that in return, and then it creates chaos, fall from grace, and then the ego. That's why it's spiritual ego, is because it's the trick. It's this idea that we're further than we are. It's this idea that we are more healed than we are. It's this idea that we need everything now, the way we want it. And then as soon as something doesn't fit the construct in our mind, like the timelines we create that are impossible to keep for the universe and God, especially the sloppy manifestors that we are, then we start to fall from grace. And that's how you could tell it's spiritual ego. Because if all of a sudden something happens and now you went from being up here to all the way down here, you allowed that fall from grace, you've allowed yourself to dim your light, and now you're in your ego again. Because again, when we're walking this path of spirituality, it's all new for most of us. Even if you were religious, even if you grew up in the church and all that stuff, which I did not. I prayed, I had a relationship with God, but I just knew what it was very early on, and I knew all the human stuff was bullshit. So for me, that always turned me off. All the hippie foo-foo, all of the kumbaya, all the holding hands, because it was all bullshit. Because as soon as people left that church, they went right back into their human egos and started being pieces of shit to one another. And that's why I knew it was all full of shit. It was all bullshit. But that was kind of hard growing up, seeing everything around you being bullshit. You just thought that this life was bullshit. You know, that's how I felt for a long time. So my ego grew very thick to protect me because of I would say the general lethargy I felt towards life, and the general just I cared about everything so much that I couldn't care about anything, and I was just in this weird apathetic state for most of the time. I always excelled, I always did well, whatever I did, because as soon as I could put my consciousness on something, woo, let's do something. But when I had many of those times to myself, spinning my wheels, hitting my head against the wall, not knowing what's up and down, left to right, because I wasn't trusting myself, I wasn't believing in myself, I wasn't believing in what I was feeling, experiencing, hearing, what was coming to me, and I was comparing myself to everyone and everything outside of me, therefore creating a spiritual ego even in this path over the last 3 years, because it became my identity. When I got out of the Marine Corps, I needed a new identity, so I tried to become a socialite, I became an accountant, I became all these things, right? That wasn't good enough. And so when I started the spiritual path, I believed that me, myself, this is my identity now, I'm this spiritual being, but it's not my identity. My identity is a fractal of God. That is literally the only identity we have, is the oneness that we all are together. But because we keep labeling ourselves, we keep egoically dimming our light with human labels and boxes and bullshit, and that's what's causing all this decay. That's what's causing us to have so much pain and suffering. And so what I'm learning is, as we continue to move forth, letting go of our spiritual egos and truly walking in our sovereignty, letting things be or letting things go, allowing things to roll off your shoulder, not taking the human emotions and feelings that we have personal, not taking the feelings we have like we're all of a sudden we move 2 steps backwards. When we can realize that all that stuff is happening for us, that we're transmuting it through this vehicle, we no longer need spiritual ego. We no longer need to defend ourselves. And here's another thing. If you stand in your truth with kindness, love, and respect, even if somebody comes at you twisted, because you're not emotionally heightened, you're not going to react emotionally like that person is coming at you. And so all this is about not dimming our light by overcoming our spiritual ego. It's a choice. We give our consent. Every time we put on a mask when we know we don't want to, we give our consent, and that creates more spiritual ego. Every time we socially distance and it's awkward and it feels weird, spiritual ego is forming. Every time we compromise ourselves for anything or anyone because we're tired or we don't want to say anything or we don't want to get in a confrontation, we're compromising ourselves and putting ourselves further into spiritual ego. And here's the thing I've noticed. Many of the enlightened beings that awoken before much of humanity, they believe themselves to be further along the path, like they don't need to do anything, and now they're completely in their spiritual ego, and you can tell because they're pointing their fingers, they're being mean, they're gossiping, they're calling people names, they're saying things like, oh, how could this person be like that, or how could you not see this, or how, and you know you're in your spiritual ego when you don't have empathy. That's the key. We need more empathy. We need to put ourselves in the shoes of other people to realize we were just them not too long ago, even if it was in a past life. That's the whole idea behind hurting animals. It makes no sense. First of all, animals are a higher consciousness than we are as humans. As human beings, yes, we move into the fifth dimension. But animals are fourth dimensional consciousness. That's why they can see ghosts and frequencies that we can't see. Yet we treat them like they're lesser than because their bodies aren't as able to manipulate and propagate like we are. But one thing I've learned over the last year and a half with animals is they can teach you so much about presence, so much about getting to the fifth dimension, through the fourth dimension, through healing yourself with presence and awareness and beingness. And again, that's more spiritual ego. Again, that's more human ego, is when you believe yourself to be further along than someone else, when you believe yourself to be further advanced than another animal or another consciousness. And I've been there, people. I have been there. I would say even at this time last year, I still didn't believe that dogs were consciousnness. You know what I mean? Like, I'm telling you, over the last 6 months, 6 to 9 months, everything has shifted for me. I was always kind to animals. I didn't like to hurt animals. I stopped eating meat a year and a half ago now. Was it a year and a half ago? A year now, about steady. I started in 2019, but I definitely cut it out in 2020. And I just don't want to eat other people's consciousness like that. You know what I mean? Even when I eat plants now, I say, I thank you for your sacrifice. Thank you for feeding me and nourishing me and giving me your sustenance, giving me your energy. Because everything's a consciousness. And everything we do is intention setting. And because we're just frequencies and everything's vibrations and it's all perfect, if you just thank everything for existence, especially the human beings that you walk around, thank you for existing. Thank you for being you. That's how you start to solve your spiritual ego. That's how you maximize your light and you stop dimming it for anyone or anything, because you have the energy to stand in your lion, because you're not doing too much. You're not thinking too much. You're not being more than you need to be. So just being you is enough. And when somebody comes at you twisted, it's not hard to stand up for yourself, because you're not even doing anything but being. So it stops making sense to you why somebody is coming at you, and you stop taking it personal, because you're realizing that it's all perfect, man. And that person is where they're at. And what they're doing is they see something in you that they want in themselves, and they don't know how to express that. So they're coming at you twisted to start a conversation that might actually be the seed that you needed to plant in their head. Again, patience and persistence and consistency and frequency and discipline, self-love, self-awareness, self-care, self-acceptance. Stop, breathe, ask, listen, trust. We're going up almost on 90 days of videos. I've been talking about this stuff for almost 100 days, almost an entire Marine Corps boot camp. Imagine a Marine Corps boot camp, 91 training days, right, where all you learned is the ascension path. I bet you somebody could truly move from 3D to 5D in 91 days if it was all-encompassing and it was intense, deep dive. I bet you somebody could ascend in 90 days. Especially now with the ascension gates open, with the energy on the planet being the way it is. It's no time like the present. But seriously, just let it go or let it be. And if you can't do either, sit with it and explore it. That's all spiritual ego is. The spiritual ego is just another layer of protection, because you're in a new part of your life that you're not completely sure or confident of. Therefore, you need to embellish. You need to build up. You need to convince yourself or others. When you find yourself in this defensive, convincing, don't know, that's ego. And there's nothing wrong with it. It just means that there's some trauma down there you still need to root out. And when I say trauma, I'm not talking getting shot in the fucking chest and having to go. There's trauma. You could fall off a curb at 6 years old, and every time you see a curb, you could get triggered for the rest of your life and not even know that that's what's triggering you. That's how easy it is to get traumatized as a human being, especially as a little human being, as a tiny human. Because everything is the end of the world at that point. And if we don't have the adults in our life to teach us how to self-regulate, how to use the emotional intelligence techniques, which I'll start getting into, the emotional intelligence techniques to teach us, our feelings are okay, to cry is okay, to feel jealous, or and just have someone there to help us, we realize very quickly that it's wrong to have those feelings. Then we bury it down deep. And by the time we get old enough to where people are like, "Are you okay?" I don't fucking know. And you just say, "I'm tired," or "I'm this," or "I'm that." Because here's the other side of that. Even if you're a 10 or 11-year-old that says, "I'm depressed," they're going to put you on some type of fucking psychotropic drug. That's going to fuck you up even more. So there is no trust between us right now, which means we need to build that trust within ourselves, which also means that when we do build that trust, we need to stand in our line and defend that trust with truth, love, and light, not defensively, right? You just stand there and you speak your truth and you stand tall in it. You don't attack, you don't explain, you don't try to convince. That's ego. So I hope you get a little bit further on your path today. I hope you get a little bit more clarity on your journey. I hope you can bring in a little bit more love into your heart so that you can recognize that spiritual ego is nothing more than unrooted trauma from our past that we need to address so that we can walk forward in this new way of being, in this new life we exist in, with confidence, respect, and assurance. And if we don't feel that way when we are expressing ourselves in this new spiritual place, that means we have more work to do, more studying to do, more research to do, more self-introspection to do, and it ain't that big of a deal. So stop dimming your light for anyone. Stop compromising yourself for anyone. There's no more time for it. If you liked what you've seen and heard today, hit that like button. If you want to join the Army of Energy, hit that subscribe button. Again, I'm done with fucking social... Oh, hold on. Sorry. Again, I'm done with social media. So I might start a Telegram. Apparently, Telegram's pretty good. I'm going to check it out. Heard it's like 15 years old, so we'll see. Again, Dirt Guys, if you're having problems self-regulating, if you feel like you keep getting so far and getting so far and then moving back, I'm telling you, you got to detox the shit out of your cells. You got to detox the trauma out of your body, out of your mind, out of your hemispheres, out of your pineal gland, out of your pituitary gland, out of your medulla oblongata. You got to free this vehicle to be the ascended being that it is, and everything will take care of itself from there. So if you want to learn more about dirt, if you want to learn more about humic and fulvic acid and how it can help you revitalize yourself, hit me up. I love you all. I hope you have a wonderful day. I hope you have an even better evening. And I will see you all at the same time tomorrow. Take care and goodbye.